What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? I was ready to click the start button right at 6 o'clock on the dot and missed it by like 30 seconds because I had to answer Trey, who's in the chat right now watching the show, watching the start of the show, talking in the YouTube chat. Had to answer him in Discord about MLB this show. There was a little buzz last week that there was, or the week before maybe, that there was maybe going to be a college mode added to Road to the Show. But like I said in there, I'll settle for some just menu upgrades. A little quality of life in franchise mode and dynasty mode, whatever they call it. Those menus, especially when you also, I guess I should say, play out of the park. And that's just so like, point, click, basic. It almost looks like an Excel sheet in a lot of ways. Those MLB The Show menus are just brutal, going back and forth in the drop downs and everything to get from like the roster to the next page to make a trade and sign a free. Yeah, it's just the worst. Hoping they improve the franchise mode a little bit this year. That's really been my thing over the years. Just sim out a bunch of seasons, then try and play like a full season in like 2040. But anyway, we're here to talk basketball, not MLB video games. We could talk NBA video games. I think they released a cheap version of the NBA 2K actually. I got a thing at like $19.99. I didn't get this year's version. I might actually download that. But anyway, been hanging out. Men at Work is on. I almost had to delay the start of the show so that I could watch the end of Men at Work. You guys are lucky that most of the best lines in this movie are at the beginning. 1990, Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen, the brothers together. One of their movies together. Post Young Guns. Both Young Guns movies were in the 80s. This was the next one they did. Those two, Keith David, the inimitable Keith David. He's awesome. Chainsaw from Chainsaw and Dave from Summer School. He's in some other stuff too. Ski School, I think he's in. A lot of 80s movies, that dude. I don't remember his name. Funny movie though. I mean, this came out in 1990, and I remember it being a funny movie. If you were new to this movie today, I don't know how funny it would be. There's some good lines. Keith David looking him in the eye and saying, "There's very few sacred things in this world, but one of them is another man's fries. Never touch another man's fries." So good. Anyway, let's say hi to some people. Cujo's here. Day's going pretty well, Cujo. Hope yours is too, buddy. Trey, we already said hi to, but Trey's got some French bread pizza planned for tonight. Sounds pretty good. Some hoops, some French bread pizza. Hopefully winning some money playing DFS. I like that plan. Steven Leibowitz, Mamba's here. Got a little quorum going. I'm sure some more people will join us. We had a good crew yesterday. Hopefully we'll go back up to around those numbers. Tell your friends. Here every day. Don't know how the hell we're going to do it during the start of MLB season when we've got basketball and baseball going. But we'll figure it out. The coat. I don't know about all that, Mamba, but hey, I'm here. Doing good, buddy. Hope you are too. Got my Knicks shirt on. Prepared. I'm on brand today. Wrong side. I'm on brand today. I'm Adidas. I'm on brand. Got some NBA. Got some Knicks. If you can see the back, this is actually a Porzingis shirt. I've talked about it before. My two Knicks t-shirt jerseys are both number 6. Tyson Chandler and Porzingis. Neither of whom lasted long enough to... the t-shirts outlasted the players, let's put it that way. But Zinger's on the slate tonight. For Boston, of course. He's questionable tonight. Got an interesting slate. We've got a absolute metric ton of value on the board already. And a lot more potential emergent value. So it's going to be an ugly one. Buckle up. Let's start with the Vegas board. And I'll pull up the sheet so that you guys aren't staring at my ugly mug as usual. Whoop, didn't. I'll pull up Total Blackness. A dark void. There we go. Right about there. Yes. Sam Merrill's on that list for sure, Trey. Absolutely. And could go higher on that list, depending on the ins and the outs there. DFS for Brooklyn's on that list, too. Yep, he's right here. Sammy Merrill's hanging out right up here. Kelly Oubre up at the top with plenty to do in Philly. Misic, presumably starting again. Plenty of run there. Ton of love in Toronto, just based on a lot of guys being out. It's ugly. It's an ugly one. Let me pull up Pinnacle. Let's talk lines. Both sites going with 8 games, not including the 10 o'clock Phoenix and Denver game, which is kind of unfortunate. I mean, it really sucks. You're leaving out basically the best players. Apologies to Jason Tatum, Wemby, Luka, and maybe a couple other guys. But if you're leaving Phoenix and Denver off this slate, you're leaving the best player in the league and 3 of the top, 35 or so players in the league just entirely off the slate. 2 really good teams. It's weird. I don't love that decision. The other thing we're looking at today, welcome to 1990s basketball. Not quite, but we're looking at some low totals today. Orlando and Charlotte starting things off. Charlotte, 8.5-point home dogs. 208-point total in that one. Philly at Brooklyn. 1-point game. Philly somehow favored over Brooklyn despite basically being out all their good players. 212.5 in that one. Atlanta at the Knicks. Knicks favored by 3 at home. 214. Detroit, Miami. Miami favored by 11.5 at home. 217.5. Boston at Cleveland. Boston favored by 8 in Cleveland. 215.5. You'll note we haven't been over 220 yet. Gets a little better toward the end of the night. New Orleans, Toronto. New Orleans favored by 9.5 in Toronto. 229-point total. Doing a little better. San Antonio, Houston. Houston favored by 7.5 at home. 227.5. It's all right. We've got some pieces, some parts. Things are priced appropriately. We've got Wemby in that game. It's a little bit to work with. The Toronto game, the one before that, at 229. A lot of pieces from Toronto. Some interesting parts from the Pellies. And then kind of the jewel of the slate at the end of the evening, Indy at Dallas. Dallas favored by 5. High-end game. 246.5-point total. So that game is way up here compared to the other games in terms of game environment, in terms of appeal. A lot of good players from star caliber to role caliber in that game. So a lot of desire to keep some spots open, to be able to rotate things around in that one, to be able to, and just to make sure that I have a lot of that game. And then we're just going to be dealing with a lot of just, mid-level value chalk type guys that are, some of them are going to get there. A lot of them are going to fail us. And we're going to wonder why we played them. But right now, this side of lock, it looks, very clear that there's a lot of clunky type names. Quick way to tell that is just look at how much yellow is in the PPM columns as compared to normally we have a little bit more dark green up toward the top, or a little bit more of this shade of green at least. Pretty rough in the per minute department for a lot of these guys. Getting to the ins and the outs. As of, let me just pull up Underdog. For all your news reporting needs, by the way, Underdog does a great job at Underdog NBA, or at Underdog_NBA. It's also linked on the projections page. Projections, if you somehow don't know, projections are free up at rotoscouts.com right now. Updated a little bit before the show. So, doesn't look like anything's changed. 3 straight tweets about Andrew Wiggins, but that's for tomorrow. Seems like he's going to play and start tomorrow. Bagley, no. So the most recent news we got was Benedict Mathurin going questionable, and we've got that accounted for here. So the only probable on the board, Caleb Martin, who is available. He's confirmed as available, so it's not even a probable at this point. Questionables. Nick Richards, a really, really, really big questionable in Jalen Brunson. I've got him projected right now just because that's how I've been handling it with questionables. I typically project them in until we get, some kind of news more like doubtful. I'll typically take them out. Obviously, an official doubtful, I don't project them. As a Knicks fan, I'm not sure I expect Jalen to be out there today. It wasn't a structural thing. It was, if you watch the replays when he went out the other day, banged knees on the play before that, came around, tried to jump, and it was essentially, a dead leg, a bone bruise, or not a bone bruise. That's a more serious thing, but a dead leg, probably a big contusion, whatever you want to call it. Just seems like an easy spot to, maybe get him some rest, not run him completely into the ground. We'll see. Like I said, I've got him in. He's the leading projection on the Knicks right now. A lot of pieces from the Knicks, and they become a really interesting potential source of value if Jalen doesn't go. Deuce McBride played basically the entire game the other day. They're already going to have pieces, Josh Hart in the 38 to 40 minute range and so on. So a lot of pieces coming out of that one, but Jalen Brunson, big name to watch in terms of the questionables. Jaylen Brown also questionable. Kristaps Porzingis questionable. Isaac Okoro and Karis LeVert still questionable. Those are the key pieces on the Cavs that could create a little bit of additional, like I said, Sam Merrill might go up even further because we're already without Donovan Mitchell and Max Strus in that game. So could just create additional float for guys that are already looking good from Cleveland. KJ Martin questionable, Cam Payne questionable, Lonnie Walker, Julian Champagnie, Wemby questionable, Benedict Mathurin questionable, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd, Luka Doncic, Derek Jones, and Maxi Kleber, all questionable. So a couple pieces to watch in that late game, of course. If Luka doesn't go, it floats Kyrie, it floats some of the other guys, Jones, Kleber. We'll see what happens downstream. I feel like they're going to get out there, but we will absolutely be keeping an eye on it. Outs, Markelle Fultz, LaMelo Ball, Seth Curry, Cody Martin, Mark Williams. That's creating all the value at in the backcourt for Charlotte again. Onyeka Okongwu, Trae Young, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Mitch Robinson still out. Neemias Queta is out for Boston. Mitchell and Strus, who I just mentioned before. Quentin Grimes technically doubtful, but doesn't seem like he's going to go. Tyler Hero, Kevin Love, Josh Richardson, Dyson Daniels, Scotty Barnes, Bruce Brown, Jakob Poeltl. That's what's creating all the value in Toronto. Robert Covington, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, DeAnthony Melton. That's what's creating all the value in Philly. Daron Sharp, Ben Simmons, Cam Thomas. That's what's creating some value in Brooklyn. The DFSs of the world, like mentioned before. And then Tari Eason, bringing up the bottom of the outs list as the last man out. So that's a lot of guys already missing. That's a lot of interesting pieces that could create additional value where value already exists or just enhance the value of guys that we're already getting to. So there's a lot to look at on this one. A lot to keep tabs on. It's more as news emerges, there's stuff to stay on top of. Trey, I don't know the number on that one. Let me pull it up. Probably we're taking a look at. Kelda's just not been good this year. Just a big step back for him overall. Let me see what he's done in a no Wemby kind of setup, though. Just given all the things that Wemby does, I feel like, he's not a guy that like soaks up all the oxygen around him. He's a big time creator and wreaks havoc out there. So I'd be surprised if there's a massive uptick. I feel like that would be, one that might not necessarily come down, but not change it upward all that much. So let's see. For the season, Keldon, right now he's right here. Right now he doesn't look good at all on either side. He's only 5,200 on DraftKings, too, both forward spots. But just 1.06% win rate and did not get into the top 150 at that price. He's been at 0.97 FanDuel, 1.0 DraftKings under normal circumstances all season. And he's at 1.02 and 0.98. So it's basically exactly what I was saying. Taking minutes without Wemby don't push him one way or the other, really. And that's over 849 minutes and 1,778 possessions since the start of the year. So that's pretty significant in terms of sample size since the start of the season. If you want to call it the start of the calendar year, just take a look. 405 minutes since the start of the calendar year, 837 possessions. He's actually down 0.97 DraftKings, 0.94 FanDuel. So that's an appreciable dip, about 0.05 of a fantasy point per minute. So not really. Minor uptick. Maybe he goes from 23 DK points to 24. Not really though. Minutes wise, maybe he picks up 1 to 4 minutes, somewhere in there. I'd probably land him at like 30, just because there would be a bunch of minutes to push around. So maybe that gets him a little bit more than a point that I'm giving him there. But yeah, it doesn't look like a real priority, at least right now. That said, you get anybody in for 30-ish minutes, there's a little bit of upside. We know that he's been a better player than what he's been this year in the past. Where was he? Like, it wouldn't completely stun me if we got Keldon for like 32, 34 minutes or something like that, and he gave you a decent game for the 5,200 on DK. It's just that he's so cheap that makes it interesting. I guess he was only 1.01 last year. I feel like I remember him being higher end than that. Yeah, 1.01 last year, 0.97. What did I say for this year? I got to get these numbers on the same sheet so that I'm not bouncing back and forth all the time. It would be a minutes thing, if anything. Like I said, like we looked at, the rates don't really change. But if he picks up another 4 minutes for this kind of a run and he can give you around a point per minute, there's reason enough to think that he could go higher than this. Let me just pull up since the start of the calendar year, he's been at 0.92 in all situations, over 708 possessions, 708 minutes, 1,490 possessions. Welcome to the Keldon Johnson Show. I just find him interesting because that's a dip from last year, so maybe that's what I was thinking of. But I was thinking he was more in the 1.1 territory last year, but just one and change. But just 0.92 since the start of the calendar year, and I think it's even lower than that over the last 30 days. So, yeah, not my favorite overall spot, but to get us back on track, top of the board. So, Kelly Oubre is going to have plenty to do. No Maxey, no Melton, no Embiid, whoever the hell else. Covington, who's been out forever. I knew there was a fourth name on that list. So Kelly Oubre at 5,900 FanDuel, 5,300 DraftKings, one of the highest owned players on both sites, if not the highest owned player on both sites. Highest owned guy on DraftKings, second highest owned guy on the FanDuel slate, and it's very, very close. Right in line with that number on FanDuel. This is a little bit higher, but his projected ownership is between the win rate and where we got him in terms of ownership. So we're basically with the field on Kelly Oubre on FanDuel. And then it looks like we do have a little bit of room for him on DraftKings. We're about... That win rate is about 10-ish points ahead of his projected popularity. Right? So we can get him out to a decent level. That's 20 percentage points on top of where the public is on Kelly Oubre in this sim. So a lot of room for Oubre. 5,300 shooting guard, small forward, 5.92 points per dollar. It's a pretty good price for his expected production. 0.86 per minute on the season. Giving him a little bit of a goose beyond that, I believe, today. What's the per minute number that I landed him at? 0.99. It's a little bit of a bonus. Going up against a Brooklyn team, there's really no change pace possessions-wise. As discussed, it is one of the low total games. 213 in that one. But let me turn my phone sounds off. But Oubre looks like a very solid piece of chalk. And it's one of the 0.87, 0.86, obviously a big difference between that and a point per minute. But among the value guys and among the, the guys that typically hit into the 50s when we talk win rates, when we talk top 150 exposure, a lot of times we are dealing with guys that are 4,000, 3,000 something, really low end in terms of the per minute numbers. A DFS, for example, 4,700, 0.70 versus the 0.87. That's also a big difference. So Oubrey's got a little bit of comfort with him. Gave you 36 FanDuel points in 26 minutes the other night. Typically plays about 28, 29, 28.9 actually for over his 47 games. Got him at 32. I could see a few more. And just plenty of work to do. Typically about a 20% usage rate under normal circumstances. Should see more usage than that. Sam Merrill, with all the missing parts. Sam Merrill was one of the first value guys that somebody, I think it was Trey, mentioned in the chat. 4,800 on FanDuel. Looks all right. 16.9%, 21% of the top 150. That's obviously very different than the two guys who were bookending him on the FanDuel board here because we're sorted by DraftKings. On DK, 4,100. Shooting guard only. Pretty good price, 5.71 points per dollar. That's 5.71 versus the 4.72 that we're getting on FanDuel. That's nowhere near the same value. 35% win rate, 55% of the top 150 for Sam Merrill on the DraftKings slate. That puts the win rate slightly below the public projected ownership. It puts our ownership well ahead of the public projected ownership, though. He's the second most chalky guy on the slate. His ownership is into it's how do I was trying to come up with a clever way to like clue you guys into where exactly he was relative to where we are, but there's no real good way to land on that number. We're 10 to 15 points ahead of the field, put it that way. Misic played 35 and a half minutes the other night, put up 25.4 FanDuel points. He was cheap enough that was all right. Wasn't great, but it was all right. He got the start with all the missing parts in the backcourt. I would expect that that's going to be the situation again. Once again, LaMelo Ball, Seth Curry, and Cody Martin all out for Charlotte. Steve Lubowitz is thinking pretty hard about maybe playing Jonte Porter on the Raptors at center. Where is he on this list? Toronto's an interesting one. The reason I didn't go that direction, if Porter starts, then absolutely. But it's probably going to be Kelly O. And Kelly O is one of the top-ranked players on the board. But we'll see how these minutes fall. I think Agbaji is interesting. 4,100 looks pretty good on FanDuel. 4,800 didn't really land on the DraftKings slate, oddly. Gary Trent is right about where Gary Trent usually is. RJ and IQ are right about where they usually are. A little bit more, actually, in terms of where we're getting to them. And plenty for them to do, obviously, to lead the team. Nora, very cheap on DraftKings, so he came up a little bit. That's a lower-end minutes option. He did play nearly 18 the other night. Got him at 19 tonight. Obviously, there's a ton of good... Look at all the 5+ points per dollar guys there. Toronto's going to be... 2 or 3 of these Toronto guys are going to be on a lot of teams. A good amount of value here. And I think there's... Once we get the starting lineup, but again, yeah, if Jonte's in the starting lineup, 36 on FanDuel, 32 on DraftKings, definitely going to make him look pretty solid. Yeah, you're right, Steven, in that he's, at 32, doesn't have to do a whole hell of a lot. He's been at 1.05 per minute on the season. It's right about, I've got him at 12 minutes, 12.69, so that's right about in line with the season-long production so far. But yeah, I mean, he could obviously go over that, give you 15, 16, 18 DraftKings points in 12 minutes and without too much problem. And if you got out to 16 minutes, something along those lines, there's obviously upside beyond that. Kelly Olynyk did come off the bench the other day, played 26, put up 24.8 FanDuel points. But that was with Pirtle active. So I would assume that Kelly O is going to get this start and play the 30 minute or more type range. I like Kelly O. 1.10 FanDuel, 1.11 DraftKings per minute over the course of the season. A guy that when he's in this price range and he's got a reasonable expectation of minutes, typically does deliver pretty decent games. So a lot of upside there. He's priced correctly. The public's going to be there no doubt about it. But 52% win rate for Kelly O, 70% of the top 150 on FanDuel. That is a significant investment. Puts us well ahead of the field, but the field is 50 plus in terms of Kelly O ownership. Kelly ownership on Kelly Olynyk. Kelly O ownership is a weird way to say that. So super, super chalky, but really looks like a pretty good option. That's cheap enough. You've got the positional flex. You've got 1.1 in terms of his per minute. You'll get more usage than this. So I like that spot quite a bit. These two guys, again, IQ and RJ, and we'll get into position by position in a sec. They both rank out fairly well. We're getting 30% IQ, 22% RJ on FanDuel, 15% and 9% on DraftKings, with win rates ahead of those numbers on 3 of the 4 corners. No, this one's, call that a tie. This one's ahead. RJ's a little bit, we're getting more of them than his win rate on the FanDuel slate, but that's okay. We're right on the public ownership on FanDuel for RJ. IQ, we are also basically right on the public ownership. We're ahead on Olynyk. Agbaji, just for the sake of it, we are a few points ahead on Agbaji. On DraftKings, and nobody's going that direction. He's projected for, basically where we got him, which was 0. So basically where we got Grady Dick is where they've got Agbaji projected in terms of public popularity. Dick 2. We didn't get Agbaji in our top 150. 0.42% win rate at the 4,800. That's obviously a massive price difference from FanDuel to DraftKings. 41 on FanDuel, 48 on DraftKings. I'm not entirely convinced that there's not a little bit of upside there. In 32 minutes the other night, he put up 31.3 FanDuel points, well ahead of his season-long numbers, 0.64 for the season, 12.8% usage rate. But he took a ton of shots that game. So if he's going to go out there and play 30-ish again and kind of go out there and chuck and happen to make some of them, at 48, I could see a few shares being a little bit valuable on DraftKings. It's like the upper limit of his viability, and it could easily go bust. He could go out there, play the 30, and not take those shots. He could go out there, play the 30, take those shots, and miss those shots. So there's a lot of variability in the play, but I do think there's a little bit more on the bone there than 0. Just one to keep in your back pocket as like I've got 4,800. I played, 1,000 shares of, who's at 4,800? I played 1,000 shares of Dylan Brooks already, and I've got the extra 100, so let me throw Agbaji into that spot. Not one to be deployed like crazy, but one to, if you're at 5% across 150 lineups, if you're building 20 and you throw them into 1 when nobody else is putting them in lineups, not the craziest thing in the world. Like, they're missing more bodies than they were the other day. Why did that get so small? Got to stop me when I do these things like shrink the windows. What else? Let's go, let's look at the guards. Somebody just mentioned Luka. Mom says, great breakdown. Can't wait to get away from Luka against the Pacers. He could score 70 again. Luka's right in here. He's actually looking pretty solid on both sides. One of the higher per minute players on the board. Highest at the guard spot. Highest overall? Yeah, probably the highest overall. Yep, 1.72 versus Wemby's 1.65. Over the last 30 days, though, Wemby's at 1.9 again. He's been absurd. But yeah, Luka, I think Luka looks pretty good here. One of the better pay-up options on the slate. We've obviously got plenty of room to get to him with all this value on the board. He's 12-7 on FanDuel. Projected, 20 points higher than every other guard? Yeah, 46 for Kyrie on the same team. 45 for Jalen if he plays. 40 for Quickly, 40 for Ingram. 41 for DeJounte. That is significant. I mean, getting a guy 20 points higher than the competition in terms of our just raw projection. Yeah, he costs a lot more than those guys, but he's paying it off. 40 minutes the other night, 62 FanDuel points. 35% usage on this season. It's Luka Doncic. I'll take my shares in a high-paced game that should have a ton of scoring in it. I like the spot. Landed 19% of the time in winners on FanDuel, and we took 28% share of them in the top 150. On DraftKings, 23% winner, 25.3% of the top 150, at 12.2. A lot of room for Luka today. I don't know that there's a comparable, assuming he plays, obviously. But I don't know that there's a comparable guard opportunity unless we lose Luka and maybe Kyrie vaults into that position at 93 and 89. We would have a ton of him. Right now we're getting him 19% winners, 18% of the top 150 on FanDuel, 15% winners on DraftKings. Just got to him 8.6% of the time. At that price, he might be coming up a little bit on DK. Let's see what the public popularity looks like. Yeah, we're leaving about half the public popularity on the board. We've got a little bit more than half of the public popularity on Kyrie. I have no real issue. The win rate is a few points higher than the projected popularity. Call that basically a tie. I have no issues if you wanted to grab 15% Kyrie, and he would look better if we lose Luka there. I'm hoping Luka goes, though. I definitely want to play Luka in this spot. I want Halliburton in that game, too. I don't know where he is. Let's see. 3.7% winner. Just 0.67% of the top 150 on FanDuel. A little bit more of them on DraftKings. 1.3% of the top 150 against basically a matching win rate. 9,000 on DraftKings, 94. Point guard only on both sites, 94 on FanDuel. Just 33 and 36 minutes the other night. But for the season, 1.42, 1.45. It's been a downturn lately. We've got him at... He missed some time and then got him in the 1.26 territory right now, which is about where he's been over the last 30 days or so. But that's a high-end player in a high-end game who's going to need to deliver for his team to compete. Buddy Hield coming out of Philly. Another guy with plenty to do today. Buddy's an okay per minute performer, 0.89. 0.92 on DraftKings. We got to him 12% of the time on FanDuel, 8% of the time on DraftKings, both against higher win rates, around 18% winner on both, 17.6 FanDuel, 18.5 DraftKings. 63 on FanDuel, 61 on DraftKings is about the right price for Buddy Hield under normal circumstances. So I do think there's a little bit of edge there. He's got enough per minute quality and enough expectation of taking his shots. Did I close Wowie? I don't know. I just got in another window for some reason. I think the sample was too small, if I remember. When I pulled this up earlier, it's too small to get any kind of real relevance, I think. Let's see. Embiid, Maxey, Covington, Milton, all gone. But he's been at 0.92 FanDuel, 0.99 DraftKings. It's just 88 minutes, 183 possessions in this scenario. But that's a little bit of an uptick and plenty to hang our hats on. And it's also usage-wise goes up to 22.1. For the season, he's at 18.1. So there's a little bit of additional room there for Buddy. Some of that, obviously, not with Philly. But I think there's room there. We all know that he can chuck when he wants to. That said, I think he's probably disappointed all of us over the years as well. Jalen Green looks reasonable on FanDuel. Looks good on DraftKings. 26% winner on DraftKings. Got to him 23% of the time. 6,700. Reasonable mid-range price. But obviously, notably higher than these guys, notably higher than several of these guys. It's interesting that he's coming through that strongly with a few cheaper guys down here. On FanDuel, just 7% winner, 2% of the top 150. It's got to be a little popular over there. Yeah, he's not popular. That was the wrong way to put it, but he's more popular than where we got him in the top 150 there. We're about a third of the field on Jalen Green. Field's a little bit below this. Reasonable enough. I mean, not really outside of one guy threatening opponent on the defensive end. 228 point total in that one. They're 7.5 point favorites. I don't know that he's going 53 and change again, but I think, moderately above where he's standard deviation or so above is on the table for sure. So I don't mind the shares, I guess. 20, get to him a little bit below that win rate, I think. DraftKings, he was highest owned player on Houston on DK, but we are slightly ahead. It's essentially where we landed on him in the top 150. Very negligible difference, but we're slightly ahead. But there is more room in the win rate on DraftKings. So I think if you want Jalen, probably better off taking him on the DraftKings slate. And I think you can go a little bit higher than where the field is, even more so than we are at the 23%. I think you can go out to the 25, 26% if you want to. Masic and Merrill we talked about. Dylan Brooks coming out of that same Houston side, 4,900. I used him as my example of a low-end option. We've all succeeded in the past with Dylan Brooks on a heat check night, and we've all probably failed more often with Dylan Brooks. 0.70 per minute on FanDuel, 0.73 per minute on DraftKings. 8% of the top 150 on DraftKings, 16% on FanDuel. Both of those below the win rates. And both of those below the field. I'm comfortable with being a little bit below the field. Still having some. Obviously, this is a significant chunk. It's 15, 16%. Call it 5 to 8% on DraftKings. That's a guy I don't mind giving the public a few shares of. Again, lower end usage, lower end per minute guy, even with around league average usage. Dennis Schroeder, 0.90 per minute on the season, pushing nearly a 20% usage rate overall for the season. Has been more low end since joining Brooklyn, but I think over the last few has come on. Let me see what's he been since, call it February 21st. Yeah, 201 minutes since February 21st, 393 possessions. Schroeder's up to 0.92 DraftKings, 0.87 FanDuel. He had been decently below that. That's basically back to, seasonal production. We got him 9.4% of the time in winners, 7% of the time in our top 150 on FanDuel. 6,400 feels at best correct, probably a little bit high. 6,000 on DraftKings, got to him 16% of the time in winners, just 9% of the time in our top 150. I'm going to assume we're behind the field on both of those. Yeah. We are leaving some Dennis Schroeder shares to the public in that sim. Totally fine with that. We're a little closer to the field because the field has a little bit less of them on FanDuel than we are on DraftKings. There's a little bit more of a gap between our 9% and where the field is on DraftKings. Comfortable with both, though. I have no real issues if you wanted to grab additional shares. The price is fine and will work tonight, given all the value. Like, you can easily afford $6,000 mid-range guys and take basically wherever you want. But it's not my favorite guy on the board. There's a lot of better options. Cal Lowry, another guy, 0.77 per minute on the season, 0.78 on DraftKings, 12.9% usage for Lowry this season. Obviously, most of that not with Philly. 5,700 on FanDuel, 5,200 DraftKings. He's at least a functional part if we're assuming around 30 minutes. 7.7% winner on FanDuel, 3% of the top 150. Better win rate on DraftKings, but didn't get him that much. And that's another one that I think I'm kind of okay with. I'm reloading because Philly's ownership wasn't populated. There we go. Yeah, it's about a third of where the field is at. Field's ownership is ahead of the win rate that we got in the Sims for Kyle Lowry. I don't think he's necessarily a bad option at 52. I think he could deliver. I think he's much more likely going to give you around his season-long production. Like if you get this 29 in 33 minutes that he put up the other night, I'm not going to say you're happy with that for your 5,200, but I think that's probably, our expectation. Right? Got him projected at 26. Give him if you give him a 20% standard deviation, there's a little bit more room, but not that much. So I don't love Kyle Lowry with his low per minute production, but I do think that the option is somewhat realistic for around this kind of exposure. I'm comfy being below the field though. Freddie VanVleet looks a little better on DK. 11.8% winner, 10.6% of the top 150. FanDuel just single digits, 9.9% winner, 6% of the top 150. I feel like I skipped over some better FanDuel options. So looking at some of the guys that are successful on FanDuel, we talked about Hield, Brooks, Luka, Kyrie we talked about. Quickly we talked about when we were going over Toronto, but again, 35.8% winner, 30% of the top 150. Does look pretty reasonable. Has floated his production a little bit. Had been in the low 0.9s over the... Why do people think that honking a horn works? Like, seriously, have you ever been driving a car and been like, oh, somebody's honking, I'd better do exactly what they want me to? Doesn't it just piss you off? Doesn't it just make you want to drive slower? And especially when they're obnoxiously honking like the person outside is. I assume they're just either blocked in by a double parker. No, it's just assholes sitting in traffic. I can see it. It's so dumb. And like if they're outside just parked. I get it if they're double parked in, maybe. No, they are still out there. Traffic's moving and they're still there. But if they're just honking because they're trying to get somebody inside's attention, that's what text messages are for. Idiotic. I'm a little bit irritated by noise right now. I got woken up, I want to say at around 8 o'clock this morning. And if you guys are regular attendees, you know that's about 3 hours of sleep for me. There was this beep, beep, beep. 2-second pause. Beep, beep, beep. All morning long coming from outside, right outside my windows. I went outside trying to find it, and it was super high pitched. It sounded like an alarm for an electronic device. Like if you're kind of like when a smoke detector is failing and it has that high pitched, a little bit less high pitched than that, but that's probably what it was in somebody's building. Couldn't find where it was coming from. Drove me bananas all morning. So that's why the honking just now, because it finally quieted down. That's why the honking got me. Jake Swales loves Kyle Lowry. Beantown's on Team Lowry too. All right. Trey says the aliens are coming for me. Especially with the field on Misic. I mean, it's not like Lowry's unpopular. That's the thing. I get it. Like I said, I do think that the play is there. I just think he's kind of low end now. And has been. Have we succeeded that many times with Kyle Lowry in this form this year? He's owned in the mid-teens on both sites. Sims are saying get below. Point 0.7-ish. 0.8-ish. Again, in 150 lineups, would I have some? Absolutely. It would be probably 3 to 5% on FanDuel, 5 to 8% on DraftKings. Cut the field in half. Could certainly succeed. Darius Garland looks okay right now, 4.8%, 6% on FanDuel. A little bit better on DraftKings, pushing about 10% across the board at 7,200. If we get no Karis LeVert, he obviously takes another little jump, as we've seen over the last handful of games. We'll see what happens with LeVert, who's up at the top of the board, but one of the guys who's currently questionable there, and then Okoro's also questionable there. So I think there is a little bit of room for Darius Garland to potentially improve his outlook. It's just that it hasn't exactly translated. 39.6 minutes the other night, put up 35 FanDuel points. He's been more in the is who he is territory lately than the enhanced territory, even with those bodies missing. So he'll probably pick up a little bit if Karis LeVert comes out. But I think at these prices, I don't know how much more we get. Probably hops into the mid-teens over here. Maybe cracks just under 10% on the FanDuel slate. And it's against Boston, too, so it's not exactly a good spot. I was talking about FanDuel, guys, and got sidetracked talking Lowry, I guess. Brandon Ingram was the guy I wanted to jump onto here, though. 20.6%, 22% on FanDuel. 40-point projection at 8,200 is pretty decent, 4.97 points per dollar, with a reasonable expectation of upside and ceiling. In 30.5 minutes the other night, he put up 53.6 on FanDuel. One of the higher usage rate guys, 27.5% at the position. He's a forward on the FanDuel slate. I think I just said that, both forward spots, but didn't really register that we're on the guards right now. But he is on this board, so I'm talking about him. So I do like him on the FanDuel slate, and he was one of the guys that was a little differentiated, but I guess not when we're talking guards. Gary Trent is that. 21.5% on FanDuel, 22% of the top 150. On DraftKings, still okay. 9.5%, 7.3% of the top 150. Just another guy, 0.7-ish per minute. Up a little bit around league average usage for the season. Little bit of an uptick here for Gary Trent, but he's probably priced fairly appropriately at 54, especially on DraftKings. That's an appropriate, correct price. You could say maybe for this situation tonight, he could be 58 on FanDuel, and it will put him like in this territory. So given the slight perception of a discount, there is a little bit of room there mathematically, of course. For, that's why he's coming up in the Sims. I'm not calculating that in my head when I say mathematically. I sound like a dick. So yeah, I do think Gary Trent is functional, but low end. Jalen, if he goes, just looks like a playable part. There's obviously upside there. I've got him right around where he's been for the last 30 days, which is like in the 1.24, 1.25 range. I could definitely see the argument for could project him at like 33 minutes, 32 minutes, just to protect against the, the downside of injury. You could shave a little bit of rate if you wanted to look at it that way. Just, out there playing, but still a little bit sore. Maybe it has an impact. It's impossible stuff to project, really. And Tibbs is kind of a lunatic. So I feel like if Jalen's out there, projecting him at 36 minutes is probably about right. So we'll leave him there until we get news. See if you guys are yelling at me that news is there. Not yet. Jake, absolutely, yeah. Oubre is Oubre's like 3 times the ownership of Kyle Lowry. Oubre is also a better player than Kyle Lowry. A bit of chatter back and a little butterball better come through. Who else? Garland we talked about. Terry Rozier. I haven't said his name in a while. 11% winner on DraftKings, 8% of the top 150 on over there. 6,500 both guard spots. 11% on FanDuel, 6.6% of the top 150. So about the same site to site, 6,800 on the FanDuel slate. I can't remember the last time I talked about Terry Rozier or the Heat in general, really. Have the Heat just not been on a slate lately? Really don't remember talking about them all that often. He's owned about double. Yeah, he's owned about double where we got to him. Right in line with what the win rates are. So I think there's a reasonable expectation to undercut the Terry Rozier. It is a decent spot for Miami, but it's also a spot that they might just absolutely wax this team. They're favored by 11.5, and it's a low total, 217.5 point total in that one. I don't love it, but that does put 114.5 on Miami's side of that equation, and that's it's the 5th highest implied team total. So if you wanted to go to the public on Terry Rozier, 10, 12-ish, I think that's okay. But Sims are saying cut it about in half. Some decent names as we scroll down the board, like Halliburton, Cade Cunningham, Bogdan. Battle of the not-related Bogdanoviches in New York tonight. Bogdan versus Bojan. Not even from the same country, as I understand it. Bogdan looks all right. 10% winner on FanDuel, 7.3% of the top 150. Trey Jones looks all right. 9% winner, 7% of the top 150. Aaron Nesmith, if he plays, looks downright good. 19.4% of the top, 19.4% winner, 19.3% of the top 150 on FanDuel. All three of those guys, just low single-digit output on DraftKings. Not really that relevant. DeJounte, all the way down here, 9.3% winner, 9.3% of the top 150 at 9,000. Obviously, still no Trey over there. A lot of upside from Murray. 50 points in 35 minutes the other night. There's a little bit more ceiling beyond that. But he's probably pretty correctly priced for this situation now. But we are getting a little less than 10%. Not at all relevant at 94 on the DraftKings slate. Could, of course, succeed at that price. I'm not saying he can't, but in Sims, 0.19% winner and just basically one of the top 150. Nobody else really. Trey Mann, 5,800. That's about right. It's continuing to start for Charlotte, but it's all the value, all the popularity and everything's going in Misic's direction. Over the last couple of weeks since February 21st, 209 possessions, 423 minutes. Trey Mann's been at 0.82 FanDuel, 0.81 DraftKings. Misic, 0.83, 0.81. That's a little up for Misic overall and a little down for Trey Mann overall. That's the territory I've got him in. That could be interesting. If you happen to catch Trey Mann on back to season-long production kind of level, he projects out at like 29 fantasy points for your 58, 57, and absolutely no ownership. It's just that he hasn't been that guy lately. It's been, 0.15 fantasy points worse than that guy lately. But that's not completely terrible. I wish he was a little bit cheaper than 58, 57. It's not exactly a good value dart throw. But maybe like one here or there. That's about where we came up on FanDuel. On DraftKings, we really didn't at the higher price, at the higher relative price at 57. I do think there's an argument to be made that there's a little underexplored ceiling on Trey Mann on the right day. He hasn't been doing that. It's not a good matchup for that to happen. I probably wouldn't go to it. Across 150, I think you could throw him in a few times. If I'm building 20, I'm probably not using that play at all. I guess it just wouldn't totally stun me if Trey Mann outperformed his projection today, but that still would be a stretch to get on the board at that price. Even if he gives us that 29 for 5,800 at point guard, that's not really going to make that dramatic a difference. Like, who's at that price? $5,800 point guard. That's not a good comparison. And maybe puts him at like Kyle Lowry levels. Maybe better. He's only 25, and Kyle Lowry's getting ownership. Great. Now I'm talking myself into this Trey Man idea. I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. Again, this is the disappointing output that we've been getting. 29-9 the other night, put up 21.8 FanDuel points. It's a decent team they're going up against. It's a 208 point total, the worst one on the board. Yeah, just let's not go there. Let's just leave it. It's one that we can kick ourselves on when it succeeds, and we don't have it. Let's jump over to forwards. Mama's looking for a value play 3,300 or lower for the last man in. Trey saying campaign. I agree. Campaign with a bullet from that level. 4.99 points per dollar. 15-point projected, 14% win rate, 9% of the top 150. Puts you below the field. I've also got them projected a little bit lighter than they do across town. They've got them about 2 points higher. So that explains where they're getting their... if they had them projected like I do, they would probably have them... We would probably be right about the field's level, if not a little bit above the field. If I had run their number in the sim, we would be getting more of them. Looks easily like the best play at that sub 3,300 or below level. The only other guys pulling anything are Trenton Watford and Craig Porter. Neither of whom, they're both 5 minutes shy of campaign. Dean Wade with a similar minutes projection. Power forward center doesn't really give you there very much. It's easily campaign, and I think there's upside beyond that too. You know, with all the missing pieces, and especially if we're saying, hey, maybe Kyle Lowry doesn't play full run, maybe Kyle Lowry is not having a great game. Instead of like a, you know, what do I have him at? Instead of 18, I've got him at 18. I've got Lowry 31. Figure there's a little bit of crossover time in there. I could see him playing into the 20s without all that much fanfare. There's enough missing bodies there. So, yeah, easily campaign in that spot. Back to the forwards. Ooh, 5:30 already. So, Oubre, Levert up at the top. Jalen Green, we've talked about all those guys. We did talk about Kelly Oubre briefly when we were talking about Toronto, but again, he looks pretty terrific. Assuming he starts, even if he doesn't start, I think there's a little bit of value there. Like, he didn't start and he played 26 the other night, and again, that was with Pirtle active. In this situation, assuming that he's going to get the start, but even if he doesn't, I think there's probably 30 minutes on the table for him. And that puts a 1.10 per minute guy firmly in play. Easily one of the top plays on the entire FanDuel slate at 5,800 center and power forward eligible, 5.56 points per dollar, I believe is your per dollar leader on the entire site. He's 6,300 on DraftKings, more expensive by $500 on the DraftKings slate against the lower cap. Still comes up pretty strong, 25.4% winner, 30% of the top 150. But we're getting him 70% of the time in the top 150 on FanDuel, 50+% win rate over there. That is not FanDuel. Gives us a good more than 10 points ahead of the field. Let's call it that. And it's a little bit more than 10 points ahead of the field. So, Oubre looks terrific on the FanDuel slate. Jordan Nwora, again, coming up with a little bit of value because he's 3,400 over on DraftKings, 5.4 points per dollar in a 19-minute projection. He's been a 0.97 per minute player on the season. Give us 25% win rate, got to him 36% of the time over there. That's well ahead. That's like 4 times the field. That's just kind of a price-driven play. With all the value on the board, I don't know that we get to that one all that aggressively. Let's see what the recent number has been again. Nora went 18 the other night with no Bruce Brown, no Scotty Barnes, and we're back in that situation. And again, we've got also no Jakob Poeltl again tonight, or no Jakob Poeltl tonight on top of things. Yeah, reasonable expectation of around 18 minutes again. What have we been since? How is he? 37 minutes. Awesome. See if we can backdate that to January. Come on. 162 minutes. This is with everybody in. Just 162 minutes since the start of the calendar year. 350 possessions. 0.98 DraftKings. 0.96 FanDuel. So basically right around what he's been. Let's see if we can get any kind of sample of... Let's see, any news coming out? Nick Richards available. Isaiah Thomas joining the Jazz G League affiliate team. And that's about it. It would be funny if it was original Isaiah Thomas, wouldn't it? All right, 66 minutes. This is a pathetic sample size. 66 minutes in this situation since the start of the calendar year, 143 possessions. Jordan Noir has been at 1.15 DraftKings, 1.13 FanDuel. It's a ludicrously small sample to put any kind of weight onto, but at least kind of supports the idea of getting maybe a little bit more than the field. I still don't know that we want to go 4x the field and get into the 30s on Jordan Noir. He is a functional $3,400 price option. If he plays the 18, 19 minutes, I can see around the point per minute production because that's where it's been, and it's been a little bit higher in this situation. Yeah, I guess it's believable. I would probably keep it maybe around the win rate, 20, 25 maybe instead of 36. You're still well ahead of the field. 36 feels a little bit dicey. You can hear the ice cracking under your feet at 36. At 20, that's okay. Jimmy Butler going up against Detroit for 8,900. Both forward spots on FanDuel getting there. 27.5% winner, 24% of the top 150. Getting there even stronger on DK. 8,100 over there, 24% winner, 41% of the top 150. Don't mind if I do on Jimmy Butler. That puts us double the field, basically. I'll take that. 8,100 is a good price for Jimmy Butler. He's 1.15 this season. Going up against one of the worst teams in basketball, or the worst team in basketball. Give him a nudge for the matchup. Give him a nudge for, I believe the recent numbers higher. Start of the calendar year, 583 minutes, 1,175 possessions. Jimmy's been at 1.25 DraftKings, 1.26 FanDuel. So, 10th of a point ahead of the season-long productions over the last 2 months. A little bit of an uptick there, and again, a little bit of an uptick just overall going up against a horrendously bad basketball team. 217.5 point total in that one, though, again. 11.5 point spread. That does put most of the weight on Miami. They were, what did I say, 5th highest in implied team total, even in the lower end game. It's partly because there are 5 games below 220 today. Yeah, I think I like the Jimmy option. I like it on FanDuel, and I really like it on DraftKings where we got that far ahead of the field. That's a high-end option to be that far ahead of the field on. I don't dislike that at all. Dorian Finney-Smith, we've touched on him briefly during the show. I think it was Trey that mentioned him again at the top of the show. 4,700 power forward only on FanDuel, 22.1%, 23% of our top 150. Low per minute production, low usage. Not a guy who wins it with scoring. capable defender, gets his hands on the ball. 19.6% winner on DraftKings, 24% of the top 150. The stats that actually reflect over here, don't really inspire. He's taking 5 threes a game. I didn't realize that. Taking 5 threes, making 37%. Oh, that's pretty good. I didn't realize he was doing that. But 8.6 points, 4.7 rebounds, 1.6. More importantly, 7.7% assist rate, 8% rebounding rate. Not the most inspiring overall guy in the world, but can get you there on minutes a lot of the time. Just minutes and the ball falling into his hands. So it's an okay enough option. Came through in the Sims, again, 20s. Where are we against the field? I think we're below the field on both. Actually, we're like right with the field on DraftKings. It's marginally ahead on both. Like a point or two ahead on both sides. So call it with the field. Buddy, we talked about already. Dylan Brooks, we talked about already. Cam Johnson, another guy from the Nets, just with plenty to do, given the pieces and parts missing for them. 25% winner on FanDuel, 22% of our top 150, 15% and 20% on DraftKings. Priced appropriately, 6,200, 61 across sites. Like the flexibility a little bit better, I guess, on FanDuel. The per dollar number is a little bit better on DraftKings. Perfectly fine. 34.5 points in 37 minutes the other night. He's been a 0.91 per minute guy, 19% usage. When we looked at it the other day, I think it creeps up into the low 20s with the missing teammates. So reasonable enough expectation for Cam Johnson to continue to deliver from around this kind of a price tier. He hasn't really climbed that much in price, and has been maintaining about this level. Brandon Ingram, we talked about briefly in the guard spot, but looking at him again, mid-teens across the board on DraftKings, a little better than that, into the 20s on FanDuel. Projects out very nicely in that spot against Toronto, and Toronto very, very thin today. Good expectation for Ingram to succeed. Tobias on both sites, 20% of them in the top 150 on DraftKings, 22% on FanDuel. It's going to be popular, but I think it's a spot where he just looks good for good reason. For some reason, he's the only guy without an ownership projection. Let's see if a reload solves that. I feel like we'll probably be in line with the field on him when this reloads. Couple points ahead. All right, I'll take it. Yeah, we're a few points ahead on Tobias on both sides. I'll take that. The highest projected player on Philly. Best player playing for Philly tonight? I think that's fair. Only 7,200 on DraftKings. I actually kind of like that. It was 0.98 for the season. We got to him 20% of the time at 7,200 for both forward spots on the DraftKings slate, both forward spots on FanDuel as well at 74. Not bad. I wish I had not changed from that Philly board that I pulled up before. Just got to set up like all of these on different tabs before a show and just leave it all open. Tobias in 135 minutes, 283 possessions since the start of the calendar year in this version of this team, or an approximation of 1.13 DraftKings, 1.12 FanDuel, notably above the 0.98 that he's delivered for the season. I could actually give him a little bit more. I gave him some. It is a really low end 6.7 point implied total. I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that you give him another point or two in a projection. And there's clear ceiling there. We've seen him hit some ceilings. Didn't do it the other night, but delivered a reasonable enough game for the money. 35 minutes, 37.5 FanDuel points. Obviously, I'd rather have this, the 72.4 that Wemby gave us in 31 minutes the other night. Granted, he's 12,000 now. Remember the days when Wemby was in like the 8s? Everybody's saying, get him now before he's 12,000? Well, he's 12,000 now. It's only 10-7 on DraftKings. 13.8% winner, 8% of the top 150 over there. On FanDuel, he came up 8% of the time in winners, but we only got him 2.6% of the time in the top 150. He is absolutely one of those luxury items that if you've got the money or if you're structuring a lineup and you're using a bunch of these value guys, plan to put Wemby in some of those spots. Just the sheer upside of the thing. The 70, 80, 90 point upside that he possesses on any given slate against any opponent at this point. I think there's good cause to just typically, put 5 to 10% in your pocket, even if he's coming up at 2%. The win rate basically supports that on FanDuel. Same thing on DraftKings. Does look like the field's going to be there a little bit on DraftKings. We're basically at the field. The win rate is a few points ahead. The top 150 is a couple points behind. But call it at the field. If you have 10% of Wemby on DraftKings, I think you're doing fine. And I think ceiling-wise anyway, raw scoring-wise, there's plenty of expectation that there could be a little bit more. I've also got him at 30. He played 31 and change the other night. There's been, more 31-minute games, I believe, lately. Let's see. Do I owe him a minute? Anything to make Wemby even better. 31, 32, 34, 27, 31. Yeah, I probably owe him a minute. Let me do that right now. And I will take it away from... this is assuming he plays, of course. Actually, you know what? Yeah, with the questionable, I'm going to keep him at 30. Forgot about that, briefly. Keeping him at 30 with the questionable. We'll see if he goes. If he goes, I think you go there. If he go, I mean, if the Spurs, if they're putting him out there, there is zero chance that they're going to risk anything with that kid. So if he's out there, we're full go. Misic confirmed starting for Cody Martin. That is plus for the Misic truck. It's Wednesday news. Magic starting Suggs, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Boncaro, and Wendell. No other news. Quarter 6. Let's keep this thing rolling. RJ looking pretty good, pretty much like RJ, 18% winner on FanDuel, 22% of the top 150, 12.7% winner. It's power forward only on DraftKings, small forward only on the FanDuel slate. Playable on both. Looks better on FanDuel. A reasonably good per minute performer with upside on the right day. And again, just plenty for everybody to do in Toronto now with all their good players missing. Well, not all their good players, but their best players. Pascal Siakam in that high-end game at the end of the night against Dallas. I don't mind having a few additional shares of Pascal Siakam at 8,100 power forward. I think we're going to have the money for it. He competes. I mean, look at these guys side by side. For the exact same price, 8,100 power forward Siakam or Zion. Two very different game environments. Siakam has been delivering pretty effectively since joining Indy. I have no issues getting more Pascal Siakam, given how much we're getting to Zion here. You can take a few of these shares and throw them in this direction if you wanted to, and just call it a day that way. I think you can also probably find your way to getting both of them in a lineup. I can't imagine that's all that difficult tonight. It'd be so helpful if they would just put these games in the same order on both of these tabs. So we're well ahead of the field on Zion on FanDuel. And right about the field on him at 8,100 on the DraftKings slate. Siakam for 500 less on DraftKings, by the way, is definitely compelling in that head-to-head. He's an 11% winner there, 9% of the top 150. We just weren't getting as much Zion there. I actually would say I prefer, even with the lower projection and everything. I think Siakam over Zion probably save the $500. But on FanDuel, that's really interesting that we got one that strongly ahead of the other with, it's a marginal difference in projection. Over the last month or so, Siakam's been at 1.16 on both sites. 0.05 of a point better on FanDuel, right around his DraftKings production. I don't dislike the option. What's he owned at? Low. Everybody on Indy is pretty low owned. On FanDuel, on Indy, or on DraftKings rather, on Indy, everybody's even lower owned. Only Miles Turner is owned in the double digits on DraftKings from Indy. And on FanDuel, Miles Turner just barely cracks into the double digits, and then Aaron Nesmith was getting a decent amount of attention. He's questionable. We've also got Ben Mathurin questionable. Ben Shepherd is also questionable. So could see an uptick for a handful of these guys. Tyrese, Siakam, and Turner basically look like themselves, I think, with game environment upside. Nembhard would pick up probably a little bit if one or multiple of those guys doesn't go. TJ probably picks up a little bit if we get the guards missing. Obi maybe gets a little bit of additional run if all three of those guys are out. So there could be additional value emerging from Indy at the end of the night as well. Let's see who's looking different. 6% winner for Evan Mobley. Don't love the game environment going up against Boston there, but 6% winner. We got to him 9% of the time. 9.5% winner got to him 8% of the time on DraftKings. Good enough. I think you mix him in at worst. Zinger, currently questionable, just 1% across the board on FanDuel. A little bit more room for him at 7,400 on DraftKings, power forward and center. 7% winner, 11% of the top 150. No real issues with the Porzingis play. It's just, typically when Porzingis is banged up, I don't necessarily want to go to it. And that's a front court oriented, at least tonight, Cleveland team. Not the greatest game environment, not the greatest total in the world. I don't necessarily love the Porzingis spot. Glad he's not really coming up like crazy on FanDuel. It's not like he's crazy on DraftKings either. If you have 10% of them, you're perfectly fine, and there is upside there. Just not the greatest. I feel like it's more a mean projection kind of a night, or medium projection kind of a night from Porzingis. Franz Wagner, 10%. We got to him 16% of the time on FanDuel, single digits on DraftKings. Aaron Nesmith, again, popularity on the FanDuel slate for sure. He's owned higher than this by the public, within reason, just a couple of points. I don't love it if he's out there. 19%, that's fine. He's a 0.86 per minute, 16% usage. Yeah, it's a good game environment, so I guess you'll let fly there. I would just rather have some of those other indie guys who are so low owned. So if I'm going to that game, I might dip around some of the other parts, but it also depends on who goes and who doesn't in that one. Boncaro, 12%. We got to him 15% of the time. That's reasonable going up against that pathetic Charlotte team with no size on it right now either. That's actually pretty good. 1.16 per minute, 29% usage, one of the better usage rates on the board at the position. 8,600, pretty correctly priced. With the field at just barely into the double digits. He's the only even close to popular guy on Orlando today. We're a little bit ahead of the field already. If you wanted to push that to even 20 maybe. I don't completely hate that. It's probably safer to keep him in that 15 range. You're still ahead of the field by a handful of points. But I think there's a little bit of additional room there for Boncaro to succeed. Just a really good player with that, going up against that team with no size available. Dunk Robinson, 10% of the top 150 on FanDuel, irrelevant on the DraftKings. Well, not totally irrelevant, 1%, 3% on DraftKings. I think you guys know what I mean. Herb Jones, again, not my favorite guy in the world. 18.2% of them to 20.6% of the top 150. It's a 0.83 per minute player, low usage. Gives you a lot of these. 14.7 and 26.4. Maybe he just gives me a lot of these and everybody else succeeds with them. I don't know. But low per minute guy, low usage guy. Comes with all the usual warnings about that type of player. Devo not really getting us there on either site. I do think there's upside. I've already got him at 37 minutes. I've already got him at an enhanced per minute number that reflects what he's done in these situations. If we get no Jalen, I do think he'll probably take a few additional shots. Maybe he just plays 40 minutes as well. Just a lot of these guys going to play a ton of minutes. I think there could be a little bit of additional upside than what we're seeing here. Call it 5% across the board for DiVincenzo. With obvious, if he's going to take 10 threes on the night where he makes 6 to 8 of them, you're going to want to have him. But I think we're just correctly priced now, 7,900 on FanDuel, 78 on DraftKings. Not looking like a overly sharp play. Agbaji, who I mentioned before when we were talking about Toronto, at 4,100, hitting the board pretty hard on FanDuel. Didn't hit the board at all on DraftKings at 48. I do think that there's reasonable expectation of upside again there, though. If he gets in the starting lineup, and especially if he's chucking, he's, again, 12% usage for the season, but the other night he took 20-something shots. Put up 31.3 FanDuel points in 32 minutes at a very low price. So that was an interesting play the other night. I think there's good reason to consider going back there. Didn't come up at 48 on DraftKings. That's 700 higher than the FanDuel price. That's why. But maybe a few shares, just because nobody's going to be going there. Like I was saying when we were talking about Toronto specifically as a team. If you're picking from a very popular team and you've got at least some foundation to support that there's a little bit of upside for this guy and nobody's going to it, he could definitely pay off that 4,800 on DraftKings. If he goes out and does what he did the other night, you're there. If he falls a little short of that, I think you're still pretty close. So maybe consider keeping a couple of him in mind on DK despite the numbers. I don't usually love saying despite the numbers, but I think there's a good argument to be made for that one that's not necessarily reflected in how he would go through the sim. Jalen Johnson, just 2% across the board on FanDuel, less than that on DraftKings. 11% down here, though. A little outlier for Isaiah Stewart, of all people. 11% winner, just got to him 4.6% of the time going up against Miami. I don't know that I love that spot. Low game total. Massive underdogs. Good defensive team on the other side. He's not popular. Single-digit ownership. We're about in line with the Fields ownership, which is interesting because he came up at an 11% win rate. So even the sim is like, I don't know. He should justifiably, at his low ownership, probably have landed a few more times in the top 150, but didn't. If you wanted to take him at like 10%, I do think it's justifiable. Just not nearly my favorite option on the board. Sims didn't really like it either. 15% usage, 0.78 per minute. Doesn't need to take a ton of shots to do what he does. But yeah, given how he came through that sim and being right around that field level of single-digit ownership, I think I'm all right with it. Jump to center. I'll pop the chat back up, see what you guys are talking about. Brunson out. All right, there we go. Trey, I don't know that he's going to be low-owned anymore. Josh Hart. I think that probably went bye-bye just now. I got to expect that it's Deuce McBride night again then for the Knicks. So that drops 36 minutes into the pool. Fun. So yeah, Josh Hart's going to easily play 40 minutes again. 40 plus. I'll probably project him at 40. If you missed it, Deuce McBride literally played not the entire game. He played 47 plus minutes the other night. I'm going to put him at 35. 37. I'm going to give Bojan some more. Bojan played 30 the other night in this situation. Brunson played like, 8 minutes or something like that? I don't know, just 1 minute. I'm dumb. Wow, Wow, was it that early in the game? I don't remember that. Burks will see a little bit of uptick. He's been pretty bad since joining the Knicks. They signed Shake Milton off waivers. We'll see how Tibbs distributes those minutes, but that's not a problem for today. So yeah, Devo will go up. Bojan will go up. Hart will go up. Deuce will go way up. Burks will go up a little. Precious, Hartenstein, and Sims stay about the same. And then there's probably going to be like a scrap minute or two projection for, I don't know. It's not even, with this team, it's honestly not even worth giving it to any of these other guys. Tibbs is just going to run a 8-man rotation tonight. I could give Charlie Brown like a token couple of minutes or Jacob Toppin or whoever. But I like being realistic about it. And those are important minutes to distribute to the guys who are actually going to play. With Jalen playing 1 minute the other night, Burks went 11. Tibbs is a madman. None of those other guys, none of the Charlie Browns, Jacob Toppins, or anybody else has gotten to the game at all. He played Hart 45, Devo 39, Deuce 47, Bojan 30. Does that even add up to 240 minutes? Yeah, it does. Wild. All right. So we've gotten one of our big pieces of news and one of our big pieces of emergent value. It's coming up on 6 o'clock. Let me do centers pretty quickly. We'll pull up the slate real quick and look at the lineups, and then we're going to punch out of here because I've got some updating to do. And I'm going to have a lot more. So again, centers, Kellyo, top of the board. Looks great on FanDuel. Looks very good on DraftKings. 30% ownership in the top 150, a 25.4% win rate. I would suspect we're getting a fair chunk of them at power forward on both sites. He's eligible there on both. And we've got some good center options. Bam landing in 31% of the FanDuel lineups against Detroit. Kind of interesting to me. 19.1% win rate. I assume that's ahead of the field. On DraftKings, 17% win rate, 25% of the top 150. I like that as well. 8,400 on both sites. Price is more functional on FanDuel, but works very well on both. Wemby, again, you can definitely take additional shares of Victor Wembanyama, especially with even more value available now. I have no issues going to 15% of them on either site. He's a play whenever you want type of a guy at this point. Again, 1.71 per minute on the season on FanDuel, 1.65 per minute on the season on DraftKings. Quadruple double upside, quadruple double type ceiling. It's absurd. I don't actually know what the ceiling is. Like I said before, over the last 30 days and really since basically the start of the calendar year, he's been in the 1.9 territory per minute, which is like, we haven't really seen that. Since the start of the calendar year, January 1, 749 minutes, 1,600 possessions, 1.9 on FanDuel, 1.83 on DraftKings. Bonkers. Let me remind you that he's a rookie, and this is the worst he's ever going to be. Crazy. Crazy upside. Nick Claxton, 7% across the board on FanDuel, 11.9%, 15% on DraftKings. Claxton was always playable, looks pretty decent. Kind of an is who he is type of a situation, which has been his situation basically all year. I feel like I haven't been all that let down by him. At worst, most of the games I've had him, I think he's delivered like this exact performance, around a point per minute as the downside. And obviously with 1.15 for the season, 1.09 on DraftKings, it's a little bit more than that there. Going up against a really depleted Philly team, I can see Claxton succeeding for the money. His opponent, Paul Reed, not hitting the FanDuel board at all at 6,100. At 51 on DraftKings, though, looks a little interesting. Nearly a 12% win rate, 18% of the top 150. Similar numbers at 6,600 from Miles Turner in that high-end game against Dallas. He came up more on FanDuel at 16% winner, 20% of the top 150 than on DraftKings at 16% winner, or at 16% of our top 150. But very, very playable on both sites. And again, another guy, decent ceiling in a game with, to hit that point again, a point total 20 points higher than every other game. I could see Miles Turner easily succeeding and blowing the doors off some of these more high-priced centers in that spot. Jonathan Isaac, just a playable part on FanDuel, a little bit better because he's only 3,500 on DraftKings. He's only at a 16-minute projection. He's just another one of these guys that the price kind of floats through the sim a little bit. 11% winner, but we only got him 5% of the time. But a reasonable per minute performer when he's out there, 1.06 per minute on the season. So if you're throwing in a $3,500 guy, like we looked at the 33s and lower before, and we got Campaign, who actually looked a little better than this. So I think I still prefer that if you're using it at util. But if you've got 35, you need somebody at the power forward center type spot, you can do worse than a couple shares of Jonathan Isaac in that game. Again, going up against just a really bad Charlotte team. Mobley, we talked about it forward, but he looks pretty good across the board. Şengün, not pulling all that much. Playable on both. Looks a little bit better on FanDuel, 7.89%. Got to him 6% of the time. 7.8% winner on DraftKings. Got to him just 4% of the time. Porzingis we've talked about. Bruno Fernando, 4,200. I think we're just beyond Bruno Fernando because we've got so much other value available. There's a little bit there. But if we rerun this closer to lock, I feel like that probably disappears with just an 18-minute expectation. Capella in, no Okongwu still for Atlanta. I don't love that spot. He did give us 25 in 18 minutes the other night. If he goes out and does that, you're basically there. It's a 1.09 per minute player. I just feel, as a pivot, maybe on FanDuel, not really on DraftKings, just 3% across the board at 38. And even at the 3,000 level pricing, didn't really get him there. It wouldn't knock me out of my chair if he succeeded as a super discount item. It's just there's so many other guys who that applies to today that I don't think I go that direction. Isaiah, we talked about Stewart. Jared Allen. Nobody else really standing out. A couple points here and there. Jonte Porter, again, could go up if he's in the starting lineup. Mo Bamba, nothing really in backup minutes. Wendell Carter, one of the starters on the board, not really pulling all that much on either site. Minorly playable. Nowhere near a priority on either site. Jalen Duren, one of the other center-only guys. No weight at all on FanDuel. 0% of the top 150. A 0.24% win rate across 50,000 sims. 4% win rate. 1% of the top 150 for 68 on DraftKings. A non-priority minor play from the Detroit side of the Detroit-Miami game. If I'm going to that spot, it's for Bam, it's for Jimmy. And that's about it, I think. I don't really see all that much else here. Let's see what's popping in the chat. Jake's locking in Hart and Devo, both going to play 45. I think you could look at that in multiple ways. Deuce McBride is also on that, probably going to play 40-plus minutes list. Precious is probably going to be in the 37, 38-minute range with upside into the 40s for sure. What I think Tibbs is not going to do is go down the bench. So I think it's very, very concentrated and pretty specific. So yeah, with you, Jake. I have no issues going with any two of those Knicks at worst. Don't make me sing the Go New York, Go song. Oops, not that window. Where is it? AceMind.io for all your sim needs. They've got an optimizer. We're live for PGA, NFL, which is over, NBA, and MMA right now. MLB coming in time for the season. So let's look at some irrelevant sims. I say irrelevant. They're still a little bit relevant, but things have changed and things are going to change a lot more as we go. But to illustrate some of what we were looking at, that's a ton of Misic. This is DraftKings, by the way. Ton of Misic. Good amount of Sammy Merrill coming through in the top lineups here. A little support for the Garland idea, the Terry Rozier idea there. Tons and tons of Kelly Oubre. That'll maintain. So guys that are definitely going to maintain that value, I would expect Oubre to maintain. Misic will be interesting. Where does he price out? versus. So Misic is 48 FanDuel, 5,000 DraftKings. Deuce is 57, 55. I'm just wondering how many shares of which of these guys Deuce is going to replace. It's probably a good amount of the guys in that range. Misic might be cheap enough that he slides through, but Deuce is going to knock out a good handful of these guard shares. Fair amount of Cam Johnson, who we touched on briefly through here. I think there's supportable upside for him. Nora, we talked about him as a value piece. Olynyk is definitely a good piece of value on DraftKings. We're going to see a lot more of him on FanDuel when we flip over there in a minute, but looks very good on both sides with a good expectation of playing time. Jimmy Butler, we're getting him a fair amount of the time. These are mostly to expectation for how they looked, but again, this is going to change drastically in the next little bit and already has. That top one was bringing us back 403 against 15 on DK tonight, nearly a 0.3% win rate. That was previously Misic, Merrill, Jimmy, Nora, Bam, Freddie Van Vliet, Tobias, and Kelly O. I tell you what, you could still play that lineup. That one hasn't fundamentally changed so much, and the slate hasn't changed fundamentally so much around it that I think it renders that one unplayable or all that different than it used to look. It's just how much do other lineups necessarily exceed that one. But the way I'm thinking about the slate, I think that one would probably still be playable. That's a pretty decent looking lineup. Spend all your cash. Leaves $200 on the table too if you want to upgrade one of those spots. Not sure where I would go with that. Maybe Nora. But he was cheap enough that it didn't really matter. Interesting, though. That's a decent lineup. It's a shame that things have changed. Kyle Lowry for the Kyle Lowry lovers out there. I know you guys are all about Kyle Lowry today. I was bad-mouthing him. Probably lost a bunch of fans by bad-mouthing Kyle Lowry. I didn't know you guys were a bunch of Kyle Lowry fans out there. Jeez. You try so hard to put on a good show, and then you badmouth one player, and everybody Just kidding. Man, I got a lot of text during this show. Let's jump over to FanDuel. We'll take a quick look, and then I'm going to hop out of here and get some stuff updated and apparently reply to some text messages. There's a bunch of Misic. Good amount of Kelly O. Hiding over here. FanDuel, as usual, we've got 1-1. 1-1 would have been how I would have gone through it. Actually, the small forward spot. Tatum and Banchero in that top lineup. I don't love that lineup, though. Schroeder, Misic, Agbaji, Sam Merrill. That's four pretty rough options. Let's see how the back end looks. Tatum, Banchero, Zion, Kelly O, Claxton. That looks a little bit better on the backside. Spends all your cash. Was bringing you back 192 on your 15. That's a rough start if you're just going by names. Obviously, there's price advantage baked in here and all of that we talk about. But some of these look a little rough on the front side. A lot of this will get Deuce McBride all over the board. We'll see some Josh Harts land over here. We'll see some DiVincenzo's land in here. I think all of those guys will start in the board pretty strongly. A lot of Toronto. Going to be a lot of Cleveland value. Going to be a good spot for the Knicks again. Keep an eye on Luka at the end of the night. What else are we still waiting on? A lot. So Levert, Okoro are keys. Technically on Boston, Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis. If either or both of those guys don't go, that could create a lot of havoc on Boston. By the way, campaign is still questionable as well. Just to throw that wrinkle in for, I think it was Mamba that was looking for the $3,300 guy. Wemby still questionable. Mathurin and Nesmith questionable, and Ben Shepherd questionable. Could create a ton of havoc in Indy. Luka, Maxi Kleba, and Derek Jones in Dallas at the end of the night. So still a lot of spots that could change. But Jalen Brunson coming off the board and shaking things up in New York is what I'm going to work on right now. So I'm going to tell you guys, hit the like button for me. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. Hop into the Discord if you haven't. And follow the @rotoscouts Twitter handle. and you'll get the notifications when the shows go live and everything. With that in mind, guys, good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something, and we'll be back tomorrow for a Wednesday show. We'll do this all over again for a completely different slate that'll be completely different after the show's over again. I'll see you tomorrow.